Welcome to the Web Security Bootcamp channel, a series of SQL injection tutorials. In this video, we'll learn what blind SQL injection is, why it matters, and how attackers can still extract information from a website even when no database results are shown on the page. Instead of displaying data directly, the website reveals clues through its behavior, such as different responses, page changes, or delays in loading. This video is for educational purposes and authorized testing only. Do not attempt these techniques on systems without explicit permission. Just a quick reminder, SQL injection happens when a website improperly handles user input, allowing that input to become part of an SQL query. As a result, the database may execute SQL code that the developer never intended to run. I already made a separate video covering regular SQL injection, and I'll leave a link to it in the description. In this video, we're focusing specifically on blind SQL injection. Blind SQL injection happens when a website is vulnerable to SQL injection, but the application does not display database results or detailed SQL errors in the HTTP response. So we don't directly see tables, usernames, passwords, or error messages. Instead, we observe changes in the website's behavior, and those changes can reveal whether the injected SQL code was executed. Blind SQL injection is not limited to login forms or search fields. It can also occur in cookies. A cookie is a small piece of data that the browser sends to the website with every request. Websites often use cookies for sessions, preferences, analytics, or user identification. If the server takes a cookie value and inserts it directly into an SQL query without proper protection, it can create an SQL injection vulnerability. In this situation, the user does not see the SQL query or the database response directly. However, if the website's behavior changes after modifying the cookie, that may indicate the injected SQL code is affecting the database query. The first important technique in blind SQL injection is called conditional responses. We send a condition that can evaluate as either true or false. If the condition is true, the website may respond one way. If the condition is false, the response may be different. The difference can be very small, for example, a changed message, a missing element on the page, a different HTTP status code, or some other change in behavior. These differences help us understand whether the SQL condition affected the application's logic. With blind SQL injection, the database data is not directly shown on the page. Because of that, the information has to be extracted step by step. First, we might check whether a specific table exists, then whether a specific user exists. After that, we can determine the length of a hidden value. Once we know the length, we can test the value one character at a time. For example, is the first character equal to A? Is it equal to B? Is it equal to C? By observing the website's responses, we can gradually extract the hidden value character by character. Sometimes a website returns the same page regardless of whether an SQL condition is true or false. In that situation, another technique is to use conditional errors. The idea is simple. If the condition is true, the SQL query deliberately causes a database error. If the condition is false, no error occurs. If the application responds differently when an error is triggered, that difference can be used to determine whether the condition evaluated to true or false. Just like conditional responses, this allows information to be extracted without directly displaying any database data. Another technique is called time-based blind SQL injection. Sometimes a website does not display different content when a condition is true or false, and it does not reveal any database errors. In that situation, we can use response time as a signal. If the condition is true, the database is instructed to wait for a few seconds before responding. If the condition is false, the response is returned immediately. By measuring the delay, we can determine whether the condition evaluated to true or false. In other words, the timing of the response becomes the source of information. There is also a more advanced technique called out-of-band SQL injection, often referred to as OAST. This approach is useful when the website's response provides no useful information. There are no visible content changes, no database errors, and no meaningful timing differences. In that situation, an attacker may check whether the database can trigger an external network request. For example, the database might perform a DNS lookup to a domain controlled by the tester. If that external request is received, it confirms that the injected SQL code was executed. Instead of relying on the website's response, the information comes from observing activity outside the application itself. Blind SQL injection is dangerous because a vulnerable website may appear completely normal. Users do not see database errors, and there may be no obvious signs that anything is wrong. As a result, the vulnerability can go unnoticed for a long time. However, an attacker can still send carefully crafted queries to the database and learn information from the website's behavior. Even without direct access to the data, sensitive information can be extracted step by step through the signals we've discussed in this video. The main protection against SQL injection is to use parameterized queries, also called prepared statements. This means the SQL code and the user's input are kept separate. The database can distinguish between the SQL command and the user's data. Input validation is also important, but input validation alone is not enough to prevent SQL injection. Another important layer of defense is least privilege. This means the database account used by the website should only have the permissions it actually needs. For example, if the website only needs to read data, it should not have permission to delete tables or modify the structure of the database. The main idea is simple: user input must be treated as data, not as SQL code. So, blind SQL injection is a type of SQL injection where the website does not directly display the results of a database query. However, information can still be extracted by observing how the application behaves. This can be done through conditional responses, conditional errors, time delays, or out-of-band techniques. Even without seeing the data directly, these signals can reveal information from the database step by step. In the next videos, we'll move on to practical PortSwigger labs and see how these techniques are used in real-world training scenarios. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, be sure to like and subscribe for more beginner-friendly content on cybersecurity and ethical hacking. And don't forget to check the video description for all the links I mentioned. If you have any questions or suggestions, please write them in the comments. See you in the next one.